Thank you all for joining me for another edition of Discover the Joy, the Purdy podcast. I have the privilege of talking to astronaut Winston Scott, and he's a veteran astronaut. And right now, he is the resident astronaut at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex here in Florida, which, by the way, was just ranked the #1 attraction in the U.S. by TripAdvisor's 2025 Travelers' Choice Awards Best of the Best Things to Do. Whew. How are things over there at the visitors complex? How are you liking your position, and what kind of cool things can people check out when they come to visit?
Well, absolutely. And I'm enjoying my position very, very much. What happens is that the Vistica complex is open 363 days a year, closed only on Christmas Day and Thanksgiving Day. On each one of the days that is open, there is an astronaut present. And that person is there to meet and greet the public, give presentation, take photograph, sign autographs, and so on. So people who visit the Space Center have the opportunity to meet an astronaut and have a exchange with that person. So I, as the resident astronaut, kind of coordinate all the visitations, the presentations, and so on of all the other astronauts over the course of the year. There's so many exciting things going. As a matter of fact, just an hour ago, less than an hour ago, we just had a rocket launch. We launched Crew 11 to the International Space Station. So people who are visiting the Space Center today was treated to a rocket launch with people on board. So there's so many things to do at the Space Center. I know we'll get into some of those as we go through the program, but the highlight can be a rocket launch.
Oh my gosh, which is so exciting.
You know, a rocket launch with people on board is one of those things that everybody in the world ought to see one time. It's like the Grand Canyon, Niagara Falls, or whatever. You know, go to London or what. A rocket launch is something everybody in the world ought to see at least once. It is so amazing, so spectacular to watch this thing and know the people on board. It's just a phenomenal thing, and it really is inspirational and exciting to see one up close and personal. And that's what they can do at the visitor complex.
It sounds phenomenal. I can hear people booking trips to Florida right now. So, but I want to
Uh,
talk about you. You were selected by NASA back in 1992. And for my own reference,
yes.
1992, that's when I graduated college, which is
Mm.
what a career you have had. Tell me just about that beginning. How does one get selected in the world of NASA?
Well, I was selected through the Navy. You know, NASA astronauts, many of which still come from the military. Early days, all the astronauts came from the military pilots. Nowadays, some of them still come from the military, but the scientists come from different walks of life, you know, from universities or research labs or whatever. So I was a naval aviator, and I graduated college in 72. And then I got Naval Aviation Officer Candidate School, designated a naval aviator. So I flew for the Navy for 12 years as an operational pilot. That means I was training for combat. Then I got off into the research and development side of flying, which means we were testing and evaluating new systems and new programs. And that's what led me to be selected by NASA for astronaut training. So my path to NASA was through the Navy. Some people come through the Air Force or through the Marine Corps or whatever. And as I mentioned earlier, scientists can come from various research backgrounds. But the U.S. Navy was my pathway to the astronaut program.
Well, so when did you decide that you wanted to be an astronaut? Was it as a little kid when somebody says, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Or were you introduced to something? How did that happen?
No, it certainly was not as a little kid because I was born in 1950. So in elementary school was in the early 50s, well, through the 50s, and then junior high back then in the 60s and so on. And I was in elementary school when the first Mercury astronauts were selected. So in those days, certainly the space program was interesting to us all. And I followed it, through magazines and television and through my teachers at school. Our teachers really tried to expose us to those current events. But I never thought I would do it. It was just something that was interesting to me. The first book I ever checked out of the public library in Miami was Project Mercury. again, it was fascinating and interesting. I never thought I would do it. Reading about the space program and watching it on TV was just that. You watched it on TV. It didn't occur to me at all that I would be involved. It just wasn't something I considered. And if I had considered it, in fact, when I did consider, I didn't tell anyone because people think you're so way out and far out if you tell them you want to be an astronaut. Maybe not so much today, but in those days, especially being a minority, there were no people in my neighborhood that flew airplanes or worked in the space program. Or so, even if I had thought about becoming an astronaut, I probably would not have told anybody because they would not have believed it. They'd say, "Oh, you're crazy." It's like telling somebody you're going to be it would have gone over better to tell them I'm going to be a rock star or I'm going to be an athlete. We can deal with that in the minority community or in any community, but astronaut, that's kind of far out. It wasn't really until my Navy career that I think that seed began to grow in the back of my mind, and I pursued it. There's a little more to the story I'm telling you now, and fortunate enough to have been selected.
And you told me a lot in that answer. So I want to tackle a couple of things, ask you more about it. You said teachers, they introduced you to different concepts and kind of started that seed. You have had positions with teaching at institutions. FSU, I know I wrote down in my notes, you were the dean of, um, excuse me, you were over student affairs at FSU and also the dean
That's
of the
right.
College of Aeronautics at Florida Institute of Technology. So
Mhm.
it's almost like a full circle thing happening in that vein. And what have you been able to share with young people? And have you seen that same interest and drive now?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I'm very fortunate to have been able to share with young people all throughout my career, even before the space program. As a naval aviator, a minority naval aviator, I was often asked to visit schools and talk to students about careers in aviation, careers in engineering. And I was always happy to do that. But of course, that was accelerated when I was selected by NASA for astronaut training. Even before NASA, while on active duty, I taught. I taught as an adjunct in the evenings where I was on shore duty. Sea duty, you deployed. When I was on shore duty, on active duty, flying airplanes, I would fly in the daytime and I taught as an adjunct at night. So I taught for Florida A&M University at their engineering program at Jacksonville, and also for Florida Community College at Jacksonville. It's now called, I think, Florida State College at Jacksonville. But I taught school as an adjunct. But the long story short is that I've always been willing and happy to share my experiences with others, especially young people, to encourage them to not become astronauts or pilots, but to reach for to reach for greatness, to not be shy and not be afraid to pursue dreams, no matter how far fetched those dreams might be. I've always pushed through this to do that, and I try to do that today. Life really beats us down. Reality, if you turn on the news, everything on there is negative. If you read the newspaper, pretty much everything is negative. There's not much going on in society that really encourages young people. And it's important that we encourage them and that we do so on a personal level so that they can see what's really possible. It's one thing to say it. It's one thing for them to read it. It's one thing for them to hear it on social media. It's different when they meet somebody up close and personal and have that person look them in the eye and tell them what the possibilities are. And that's what I've always tried to do and what I continue to attempt to do in my life at this stage.
And you said reach for their dreams. I thought for sure you were about to say reach for the stars.
Reach for the stars. If their dream is the stars, their dream may be something else, but reach for their dream, whatever it happens to be.
Tell
Yeah.
me, I
Uh,
gotta know, what is it like to be out there? But take me through that whole feeling and the experience of being an astronaut and going to space. The walking, first of all, that suit, holy moly. It feels very
yeah, well, there's,
claustrophobic, it looks to
yeah,
me.
well, the suit is big and bulky for a spacewalk. You're talking about the EMU, the Extravehicular Mobility Unit, fancy name for a spacesuit. Yeah, it is big and bulky. In fact, it weighs over 300 pounds on Earth. Now, in space, of course, it doesn't weigh anything, but you still have that mass that you're moving. in addition to your body mass and your tools. So you're routinely moving hundreds of pounds of mass when you put that suit on it and perform a spacewalk. Now, the suit you're talking about, again, the EMU, is only used by those of us who perform spacewalks. That's not a suit that everybody wears. When we launch into space, we wear what's called a launching entry suit. It's a much lighter, much more pliable, flexible, partial pressure suit that's designed to be worn when you launch into orbit and when you return from orbit. Once you're up there, you're in a regular shirt sleeve environment, short sleeves, short pants, and so on, and casual clothes. There's several different suits that you wear during different parts of the mission. But the ride from Earth to orbit is absolutely amazing. There's nothing like it that you have ever ridden on the face of this Earth because it never stops accelerating. So astronauts go out to the launch pad and enter the rocket 2 hours or 3 hours before actual liftoff. In fact, the crew today went out 2 hours or 2.5 hours before actual liftoff, and you get strapped in. You climb into the rocket and lie down with your feet up in the air. Rockets all stand up on the tail. So you have to climb in and lie down with your feet in the air so that people to help you get strapped in and get your suit plugged in and get you ready. Then they all evacuate. The real action starts about 7 seconds or thereabout, 7 seconds before zero, when the computer will ignite this, in my case, the space shuttle, main engines. And if all three engines will ignite properly, then the solid rocket boosters will ignite at T equals zero. And when the solids ignite, there's no turning back. So everything has to be operating properly. And at that point, the space shuttle is like a shot off the launch pad. If you watch rockets on TV, it looks like they kind of float up in slow motion, maybe. But
Yeah.
in reality, they jump off the pad. It kind of kicks you in the butt. We pass 100 miles per hour before we clear the tower. And we pass Mach 1, the speed of sound, in roughly 45 seconds or thereabout. And then we just continue to go faster and faster. The G forces, the accelerating force, are pushing you back in your seat as you continue to go faster. And I can remember on both flights watching my gauges, I could see Mach 2, Mach 4, Mach 5, Mach 8, Mach 10, Mach 12, Mach 13, Mach 14, Mach 15. And then we're going so high and so fast that Mach number has no meaning. And we go all the way up to 17,500 miles per hour. So from the launch pad, from 0 miles per hour to 17,500 in only 8.5 minutes. It's an incredible ride that never stops accelerating. One of the things I like to talk about, I like to illustrate for the audience is that my first flight, we launched at night in the darkness, but about halfway through the ascent, I could look out the front windows and see the day half of the Earth coming. So we launched in darkness, accelerated all the way around the Earth, and reached the day half, all before reaching orbit at 17,500 miles per hour. So it is an amazing dynamic ride that, unless you've flown a rocket, you've never experienced anything like that.
So, so you are actually feeling that push the entire
Oh,
time
yes.
until you get
Oh,
into
yes.
space.
Yes, yes, it's pushing you back into your chest. Everything feels it weighs about 3 times your normal body weight. Your arms, if you lift it 3 times, your head lifted 3 times. And it just stays there. It never lets up until you reach orbit, 8.5 minutes later.
So then, which blows my mind. So once you are in space, then that feeling of weightlessness takes over.
Yes, remember the rockets are propelling you forward, they're pushing you back into your seat. When you reach your MECO target, MECO is main engine cutoff. So you launch towards a particular target. The target is a location, a direction, and a velocity in space. You will hit that target at the appropriate speed and location, and that will keep you in orbit. So once you reach it, then the computers typically, we can do it manually, but the computers can do it better than we can, will shut the engines off. That's called main engine cutoff. Once the engines are cut off and the thrust is released, then you're suddenly thrown forward in your seat and everything begins to float because you're weightless now, except your seat belts are holding you in. So you unstrap and now you're in zero gravity and you float for the entire time you're in orbit until you re-enter the atmosphere some number of days or weeks or months later. That's right.
Did it ever occur to you? Well, I'm sure it did, but your thought process while this is happening, I know mine would be, holy crap, I could die. But does that ever, where does that fit into this whole process while you're doing this?
Well, you don't think about things like that. If you're worrying about that, you're in the wrong business. You probably should not be there. You should have done something else a long time ago. So, academically things can go wrong, and you prepare for emergencies. Our training, a lot of our training is spent on contingencies of when things go wrong. When we prepare for flight in simulators, oftentimes the simulator instructors will throw emergencies at us. We spend so much time dealing with what we call off-nominal situations, how to handle those emergencies. In fact, it's a treat when we get a simulator that goes well, that goes right, because we spend so much time practicing when things go wrong. So you're aware that things can go wrong, but you don't focus on that. But going back to my Navy days flying airplanes, it's the same thing. You practice for emergencies and you're prepared for emergencies, but you don't think about that. If you thought about what could go wrong, you probably would never launch. You wouldn't fly. So again, it's not for everybody, that's for sure.
Well, there is one thing I wanted to ask you about being in space. Many astronauts speak about this overview effect, this sense of unity and perspective, because you're seeing Earth so far away, and then everything that you may be worried about on Earth just seems so minuscule. What are your thoughts and your reflections when you're out there?
Yes, yes, you're absolutely right. And one of my most vivid memories, of course, is the first time I saw the Earth from space. And another memory is the first time I saw the Earth from space while on a spacewalk. I'm outside in my suit and I look over and down at the Earth. And you're right, the Earth is one entity. There are no divisions of cities and states and countries. The earth is very, very bright, very colorful, very beautiful, and very quiet and peaceful. You see no turmoil from up there. Everything looks is colorful and peaceful up there. It's just one community living on one planet. And you also see the boundaries of the earth, and you realize how small the earth is. When you're here on the surface, or even when you're in an airplane, no matter how high you are in the airplane, you can only see to the horizon. Now, when you're in space, you see the boundary in the horizon, but then you see out past the horizon. You see other stars, other planets, and you realize how small and how finite the Earth is. And it gives you a better sense of how fragile the Earth is and how we all ought to do a better job of taking care of it and how we ought to do a better job of getting along with each other. It really gives you, it's a different perspective.
It sounds like heaven, actually.
In a way, it is because again, it's so peaceful. Also, space crews, even during my day on the shuttle, the crews were all international. We know what's going on right now, for example, with Russia and Ukraine. But I had a Ukrainian cosmonaut on one of my flights, and I knew all the Russian cosmonauts in the office. We didn't fly in space together, but we all in astronauts together. So I knew them all. We all get along together. I had Japanese astronauts on my flight. Had astronauts from India on my flight. So we were international and we were all one family. We got to know each other. We worked together and our lives depending on each other. And we found out that we have more in common than we are different. So that's another thing that's sort of driven home by looking at the earth out there is just one human family as opposed to all these different factions that the nightly news throw at us.
Want to ask about this interesting little caveat I learned about you. You're a musician also.
Yes. Uh,
How does that fit in to all of this scientific, heavy duty stuff? And you're a trumpet player.
It's not unusual that people who do mathematical or scientific things are also musicians. It may seem unusual, but it's not. What's unusual about me is that I earned a degree in music as well as a degree in engineering. But it's not unusual that people are musicians. Einstein played violin, just for example. Yeah. So John Glenn played trumpet in his high school band. We had an astronaut band in Houston. And then we had other bands that consisted of engineers and so on. So my point is people who perform mathematical type things are quite often musicians. And when I was growing up, I was a very, very good musician through high school. And that really was my ticket to college at Florida State University, getting to the College of Music, because I was such a fine musician. Well, FSU exposed me to engineering, and I've been to study both music and engineering, eventually earning degrees in both. But yeah, I'm an active musician right now. I still play regularly. And I thought at one point I was going to make my living as a professional musician. Absolutely. But you know what? And that's another thing that I try and instill upon students is that don't allow people or society to pigeonhole you. Sometimes our educational system says to students, if you do this, then you can't do that. If you major in this, you can't do that. Well, that's just simply untrue. You can do as many things as you want to do. If you want to be a doctor and a singer, be a doctor and a singer. If you want to be a writer and a dancer and a nurse, then be all three. Now, there's a practical part. You may have to make one, you make your living in one, but there's no reason why you can't do all three. And the point is that life is so short, we should enjoy it as much as we can, and we should experience as many activities as we can, and we should broaden our horizons. We want to be broad people, not narrow-minded or one thought or unidirectional people. In fact, NASA likes people who are very, very broad. You'd be surprised. You know, there was one astronaut at Johnson whose hobby was cake decorating. You know, she was a baker. She baked all these different goods. Mae Jemison, the first African American woman in space, was a dancer. Mae liked to dance. You know, Chris Hadfield from Canada, Canadian astronaut, was a very talented musician, probably the most well known, sang and played all the David Bowie songs from the International Space Station a few years ago. So, yeah, it's people should be broad. I encourage students to broaden themselves out, learn new things, and do new things.
How,
Absolutely.
how did you make that choice when you could have gone one way or the other? What was it for you that leaned you toward astronautics?
Well, when I was growing up as a kid, as a youngster in Miami, I was always interested in science and technology. We didn't have role models or people in those days to steer us towards engineering. I didn't know what engineering was or physics was. I was just a very good math student, but I was a very good musician. And I had role models in music, in the music field. There were role models all over the place for African American musicians. And I was very good at it. So I decided to go off that way. But when I get to college, again, I was exposed to engineering, and something sort of clicked inside of me. I realized that I'm supposed to be doing that. I really need to pursue this. So I started taking math and science and engineering courses in addition to my music courses. In those days, you could pay one tuition fee and take as many hours as you wanted. Today, you pay by the hour. In those days, you pay one fee and take as many hours as you wanted. So I was taking 21 hours a quarter because I was taking calculus in addition to music theory because it's something I wanted to do. It ignited a bug inside of me to pursue it. And I started taking the math science class. I enjoyed it, thoroughly enjoyed what I was doing. So it was an inkling of something, a hunger that was inside of me, and I followed it. And that's another thing that I try to say to young people. It's very easy to ignore inklings that are inside of you, things that pop up in the back of your mind. They may be small and they may seem so far-fetched and far out that it's easy to ignore them. But if they're there and they're constantly there, even though they're small, then maybe it's something that's meant for you and perhaps you ought to pursue it. Had I not pursued it, then you and I wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right. And
Yeah.
I would imagine there are a lot of people who might see this, even young people who look at this and say, man, I would love to pursue my dreams, but they may not have the means or they grew up in not, their family may not have a lot of resources to be able to help them with that. But I'm sure you've seen that in the colleges where you've taught, maybe in the friends that you've had growing up.
Yes, yes. Well, my parents didn't have a lot of resources. You know, I came from a modest income family. I mean, came from an intact family. You know, my father and mother were present in the home, and education was always key to the Scott family. The kids we had to do our homework first. You know, that was important. But it doesn't take a lot of resources. There are ways to accomplish goals and dreams for people who want to do it. That's the beauty of America, is that really anybody can do anything they want to do if they want to do it bad enough and not make excuses. I mean, look at you and your success at WJXT and also your podcast. You probably had some obstacles or some people who discourage you, but you're successful. Yeah, I know you won awards for your podcast. So you're a perfect example. I'm another example. So anybody can do anything they want to do. And I encourage students to not listen to people who tell you what you cannot do. If somebody tells you you can't do something, you ignore those people. Just ignore them because it's simply untrue. Anybody can do anything they want to. I don't want to get into preaching, but it is like a sermon. And it's something that people have to embrace. If you embrace it and believe it, then you can do it. And that's what I try to instill in young people.
I don't see it
Another thing,
as a sermon, I see it as motivation.
absolutely, it's motivation. That's motivation too. Is all of that ties in together. But motivation really comes from inside of a person. You and I can encourage, we can facilitate. We can't really motivate. People have to motivate themselves. Motivation comes from inside. And along with encouraging and instilling if I can pivot back to the visitor complex, when I was growing up back in the day, we didn't have a visitor complex. But even in my neighborhood schools, I grew up in the city, our teachers tried to do what they could to encourage us. We would visit the public library. We would take field trips. We would go and visit different facilities and have people talk with us. Well, nowadays, the students have a lot of facilities available to them. If I can get back to the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, every sixth grader in Brevard County, once a year, get invited to the Space Center free of charge. All you do is show up. And then there's special discount, special packages or rates for Florida students all over the state. So here's an opportunity to visit a place that can be inspirational and supportive to the dreams of young people.
The opportunities are there. Just got to dig for them
Opportunities are
sometimes.
there. Absolutely.
Tell me about you brought it up several times, just being a minority in the NASA program. I would imagine it's becoming more diverse. Clearly, you deal with other countries who are all trying to get in on this race to space. But talk about being that role model.
Well, I take being a role model very, very seriously. I can remember some years back, there were very famous people who were saying that they were not role models. These were athletes, and they were saying that, "Oh, I'm not a role model." And my answer to them would be, "No, you are a role model. You don't get to choose whether you're a role model or not. The only choice you have is whether or not you're a good one." So, in my role as an astronaut, I am a role model. As a pilot, as a naval aviator, I am a role model. People pay money to go to the movies to watch actors do what I did for real. If you watch those movies called Top Gun, that's what I did for real. So, I am a role model. That's not my choice. My choice is whether I'm going to be a good role model or not. And so I take that very, very seriously. And I try to be the best role model that I can. I try to show young people that there's nothing magical about me. I may have had a magical career in some ways, but there's nothing magical about me. I'm a regular person just like they are. I went to school, I studied, I did homework, I had stumbling blocks. I didn't always understand certain things. I had to go get extra help over here and so on. So I tried to get to show them that, again, anything is accessible to them if they work hard, persevere, and not give up. And that's what's important to me about being a role model.
I have another
And
couple of questions for you.
yeah,
Oh, yes.
sure. No, I was just going to say that again, my message to young people is not so much that you ought to become an astronaut or you ought to become a pilot. My message is that you ought to pursue whatever it is that's your dream. Everybody has a dream inside of them for whatever they want to do. And they may want to be a nurse, a teacher, doctor, a lawyer, a broadcast journalist, or a writer, a dancer, whatever. Find out whatever it is you want to do that you're passionate about and then go for it. And then don't give up. That's my message.
Of everything that you've experienced, your Navy career, your career with NASA, your musical career. Is there anyone that you favor or that you like for different reasons? Tell me about your thoughts when you reflect on all that you've accomplished.
When I reflect on all that I've accomplished, I believe my aviation, my flying career is what I was put here to do. I believe each one of us was put here on earth with a specific purpose. The key is we have to find what that purpose is and then pursue it. And even though I came at a time when those things were not necessarily readily available to minority communities, I managed to achieve that. Nowadays, everything is available. Our students from every community can be exposed to these things. But anyway, my aviation, my engineer, my flight career is the highlight. That's what I was meant to do. I love everything else about my life. I love music and I love everything else about it. But I was put here to fly. That's so far fetched, and there's so many. Uh, there was so many not obstacles, but it's such an unusual path to take. Yeah. I was being introduced one time at an event, and I never thought about this, but the host and doing the introduction said that there are about 8 billion people on Earth, billion with a B, 8 billion. Only about 200 have walked in space, and I'm one of the 200. I didn't think about that at the time, but as I reflect back on that, that's a special calling. Okay. And well, I believe each one of us has a special calling. You have a special calling. I have a special calling. If a person can get in touch with what it is they're supposed to do and pursue that and work hard and study hard, then they will reach, as you just said, reach their star.
Any kind of struggles along the way that you've learned from? I know I would imagine having such attention to such a specialized career, there may have been family sacrifices and time. I don't know. Maybe I'm just making that up. But tell me about things, sacrifices that you've had to make.
Well, the sacrifices I've had to make are sacrifices of working hard and focus and never giving up. And when you run into obstacles, which I have, you work hard to overcome those. Everybody has obstacles in their lives. And I think the most important lesson, if I can think back over my life, I could sit here and list a whole bunch of things that happened that were negative. I could do that, but that serves no useful purpose. That's a waste of time. Why do that? The only important thing is to realize that everybody in life will experience obstacles. Different people will experience different obstacles. Some people may have a health obstacle, they may have a financial obstacle, they may have something on the job, they may have a family obstacle, that's just life. Get over it and get past it and move forward. So that's my message. Toughen up, man up, woman up, and deal with it. And I know that your podcast is very, very widely broadcast. I want to be careful, and I'm talking to all of the audience, but I also want to talk to the minority audience because I am a minority. You are a minority, and maybe we have some minorities listening. Everything bad that happens to you doesn't happen because you're black. Just get over it. Some things happen because they just happen. That's just life. You just have to really realize that that's how life is. And when you reach obstacles, work hard to overcome it. Get help if you need it. Ask for help. And there are people out there who will help you. And everybody who is helpful does not have to look like you. Sometimes the most help comes from somebody that doesn't look anything like you. That's the message I need to get across to young minority students, okay? That anything is available. Obstacles will come to you. They're not always because you're a minority. They're just because life has obstacles. Get over it. Get some help and overcome an obstacle and never give up. And I guarantee you'll be successful.
That's very
You must have had some
interesting.
obstacles. You must have had obstacles in your career.
Yes, yes. It's interesting that you say that because I think back to my dad, who was one of the first Black police officers in Trenton, New Jersey.
Yes.
And he
Mhm.
was patrolling and looking out for the good of everyone. But at the same time, he had rocks thrown through his home window because it was during a time where there was so much tension, racial tension, but he still did his job and did it so wonderfully. I'm so proud of that.
That's right. That's right. I want to be clear. there was a time when those things were an issue. My father was the first black postman in Miami to carry mail. At one point, jobs were segregated. Black people couldn't carry mail. I didn't know this until he retired. When my dad retired, and they came out with all these proclamations in the mail and the newspapers wrote articles about him. It was the he was one of the he and John Fryer were hired at the same time, the first black postman in Miami. And he talked about how people would sick the dogs on him and throw rocks and hurl racial insults when he was delivering mail. Yeah, of course, there was a time when those things happened, and maybe they happened from time to time, not an isolated incident, but for the most part those issues with carrying mail don't exist anymore. Those issues with being a black police officer don't exist anymore. We got half the police chief in America black, half the
Sure,
sheriffs in America
but it
black.
seems
You
like
know,
things have
yeah, so
shifted those kind of.
things have shifted. Yeah. So we as black people need to not hold on to the past and say that I can't be a police officer because I'm black. I can't be a postman because I'm black. No, no, no. Those days are gone. If you qualify, you can be not only be a police officer, but you can be the police chief. So that's the point I'm trying to. We can't move forward if we keep looking backwards and bringing the past into the present. We've had black men in the White House, you know, so and black governors and lawyers and Supreme Court justices, black female Supreme Court. So my point is to young people, especially young minorities, is that anything is available to you if you qualify, you work and you overcome the obstacles. And every obstacle is not racial in nature. Sometimes obstacles are just obstacles because that's how life is. Non-minorities have obstacles too.
And
So
sometimes they
that's
can be racial in nature, but it is the way you
sometimes
handle it.
that's right. That's right. Sometimes it can be. I remember a time, and maybe how far we gonna get off on this, but podcast is informal. We can say anything we want to say. But when I was little growing up, there weren't any black people on TV. There were no podcasts. Everything was television right then. But you can, if there was a black person on TV, we stopped what we were doing. Everybody would gather around the TV because mom and dad would holler, Winston Jr., come here. There's a colored man on TV. We stopped what we do and run and then watch because it was so unusual. Nowadays, we're everywhere. Not only are we on TV and radio, we produce. I just got to watching Tyler Perry's latest production. You know, I'm on your production. You're the producer. You own it. You know, when I was little, you wouldn't have owned anything like this. I mean, so my point is, times have changed, and we need to understand it and embrace it. We need to not live in the past. We need to live in the present, and the present is such that anybody can do anything, and we need to not let people handicap us by it.
Any advice, though, for those who do come across, because we're dealing with in the news, just dealing with a lot of racial tensions in different neighborhoods, in different, you know, jobs. And there's always those
Yes,
incidents that make national headlines when it involves
yes.
race. So
Mhm.
while it's still there, what do you say to young minorities who do come across instances like that?
First of all, be sure it's real. Okay, don't go off in something that's half cocked and unreal. If it's real, you deal with it. There are methods to deal with it. It's called the legal system and the court system, and you fight those things. Yeah, you have to stand up and fight it. Okay, so if there's something unfair that happened to you, then you fight it out legally. You don't fight it out by taking a gun or knife and shooting somebody, but you fight it out through the court system and you win that way. And but most of all, we have to be fair. If we want people to be fair with us, we have to be fair with them too. So you can't go two ways. I want fairness. You treat me fair. I do you any way I want to do. So we have to embrace fairness, and then we have to fight when there's injustice and unfairness. Absolutely, we do. Injustice also. Look at all the anti-Semitic stuff that's going on. So black folks not the only people having hard times. Okay, and look at all of the anti-Hispanic stuff that's going on, and maybe there's some anti-LGBTQ stuff going on. So every one of us have to fight for fairness for everybody else. Fairness has to be for everybody, and we do have to fight when instances occur like this. Yes, certainly. I'm not saying don't stand up for yourself. I'm saying that we have to not embrace a culture in 2025 that hasn't existed since 1965. That's what I'm saying. And I see a lot of people in America who are trying to keep that 1965 culture alive because it keeps them in power. That's what I'm saying. Now, that might not be a popular position, but you ask me, what does it take to be successful? What do I say to young people? Like, I think I've been successful. Yeah, and that's my answer.
And before I let you go, tell me what brings you joy right now. We're discovering people's joys. What brings you joy? I'm landing it on a good note. That was a deep conversation I did not expect to have with you, but it's great. But I
It
would.
is great. It is. You know what brings me joy is sharing my experiences with others and inspiring them. And it happens all the time. I was playing tennis. And I'm gonna go off again, but podcast is great because we can have this kind of conversation. I was out playing tennis this morning. I was at the tennis court with a group of people, and we were playing tennis. And we got through. The next group were little children. They were waiting on a tennis camp. These were kids like 5 or 6 or 7 years old. And the little kids looked up at me and they say, "Hello, Mr. Astronaut. How are you doing?" I say, "I'm fine." And one of them said, "Where does the astronaut eat his lunch?" And it's at the lunch pad instead of the launch. So my point is that see, these little kids recognize me, and interacting with me is an experience I think that will carry with them for the rest of their lives. It will be inspirational to them. That's the kind of thing that gives me joy, to share my experience with others and to inspire them in whatever way I can. And sometimes the inspiration is just being kind to them or saying a kind word and high-fiving them and smiling. That's what brings me joy. And it also brings me joy that when people look at me as an astronaut, they don't look at me and say, he's a black astronaut. They say, he's an astronaut. They don't care what color you are. All they know is you've flown in space. When people come on your show, they don't look at her and say, "Oh, she's a black broadcaster." They don't care what color you are. They just know they're on the joy. What's actually let me say
Discover the
joy.
joy, the Purdy podcast.
The Purdy podcast, Joy Purdy, the Purdy podcast. That's all they care about. They don't care what color. But and one of the ways I mentioned playing tennis, but another way that we accomplish this, or that brings me joy, is again, if I can pivot back to the KSC Visitor Complex. It's just an incredible place. As TripAdvisor said, when people come there, they can not only get to have fun, get to see some educational and inspirational things, but they get to do some things that stay with them the rest of their lives. Not just rocket launches, but actually seeing the equipment work, seeing people who work there, experiencing immersive events that can take them as close to going to space without leaving the face of the earth. All that's available right there at the KSC Visitor Complex. So I hope people will take this positive ending and book some trips out there to visit, and they'll either see myself or one of my colleagues on whatever day they're there, and I guarantee they'll have a good time.
Winston Scott, I would love to talk to you again in the future. You just have just a wealth of information and a wealth of insight, and I truly appreciate that. I really do.
I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. And I hope you and your family will come on down to KSC and visit with us. Let me know when you're coming, and we'll be glad to host you down here.
Yes, sir. Thank you.